Okay, it's the end of the session. I'm here with, you can't see, but little Etta's here at my feet, and Hulkster, or Hulk. And this is their roadmap to success. Now, these dogs, basically, the chief reason that the Guardians wanted me to come in was because of because of barking. And Hulk is an old dog who has been doing things for so long, I don't think he even realized he's barking half the time. Dogs get into behavior patterns or habits. They have kind of a similar, their brains work in a similar way that humans do. The more that we do things, the easier it is for us to do it because something happens over our myelin sheath, over our neural pathway, something called a myelin sheath develops and helps our neurons travel faster. And this is why the more we practice things, the better than we get. Same thing for dogs. The more that they continue doing something, the more they're going to continue. Hulk has been barking for a long time. And so I think sometimes he's barking because he just didn't know what to do. Now, sometimes he barks for a reason. There's somebody outside. Now, for dogs, they learn through association, repetition, and good timing. So if Hulk hears somebody outside, and he doesn't do this at the window, but he does it at the fence. So he's out in the backyard, and one of the neighbor kids comes out, and he sees them, and they're moving around too fast for him. So he runs over there and barks at them. And what he's saying is, hey, I disagree with what your behavior or your presence or your proximity to the fence or whatever it is. The more and he keeps on barking, and eventually the kids get tired of hearing the barking, or they just get tired of playing, and they get done, and they go inside. Hulk thinks my barking made them go away. So every time that happens, that reinforces the behavior. And so one of the first things we talked about was maintenance. Maintenance is basically eliminating temptation or the things that are going to trigger the response. Now, we're in an HOA in this situation, so the Guardians are a little bit limited on what they can do to the fence. For dogs, the closer they get to something, the more intense it is. And so one of the things that we always tell people to do is to increase the distance until your dog stops reacting. It's going to be a little bit harder for Hulk because he barks a lot, just for no reason. And so what I recommended towards the end of the session is setting up a small fenced area, maybe about 12 feet, square feet of something, so when we can let the dogs out in that small area. Right now in the yard, it's just so big that they can probably catch Hulk, but Etta they're not going to catch when she really wants to do it. And that'll become a fun game for her running away. And then she's practicing evading. So if you have a small area that's farther away from the fence so that the kids being outside is going to be less intense, and you're helping the dog practice being in the yard without barking. Now, when the weather gets nice, you can do the same snuffle, the lick mat that I talked about, or giving them puzzle toys or whatever it is outside in that little fenced-in area. And if the neighbor comes out, you're going to go out there and you're going to call the dog and bring the dog inside immediately so your neighbors see, hey, they're trying to work on the situation. Every time the dog barks and we come outside, they immediately bring their dogs inside. So I went over some tricks. I'm not going to go over them here on how to help your neighbors actually not be so frustrated with you. If you have a dog that is barking and causing your neighbors to be frustrated, let me know. I'll share those tips with you as well. But basically, what we want to do is create a situation where the dogs have more confidence instead of punishing them for the barking. A lot of people get a shock collar, bark collar, or a citronella spray. They spray the dogs, or what else do they do? They use the sonic little remote control thing. All those things are called are forms of aversive training. When a dog is barking, it is barking for a reason. It is trying to communicate something. And if you stifle the symptom, the barking is a symptom, often the dogs will start being aggressive or fearful, or they'll start defecating, or they'll start chewing things to compensate. The problems that you will trade off are far worse than the original barking problem that you have. And so what I like to do is identify what the root cause of the problem is and identify and fix that. I think the dogs think somewhat that they need to contribute to the group by protecting the group and by barking at things that they don't like and making the things go away. So if we can have that little 12-foot area, and we can go get those blinds from Menards or from Pier 1 is where I used to get them, but I'm sure you can get bamboo reed matting it's just a roll for blinds, and put them horizontal. It lets wind block through, but when the dogs are in there, they can't see if the kids come out in the yard adjoining across the way. And so that helps reduce that stimulus, so they're not so likely to continue doing that. At the same time, we want to build up their self-esteem and confidence, and we want to drain their energy. So we'll talk about the draining of the energy first. A Hulk is an older dog. He doesn't need a lot of physical exercise, but walks are great. Walks are very stimulating, especially Dachshunds. They have these big ears. When they walk, their ears go like this, and this creates a wafting of the smells that go right up to the dog's nose. That's why bloodhounds and Dachshunds have big ears. But if the dog is seeing things and barking at things that they see, then they're not getting the sniff, which is how they should encounter things first. So one of the things I would recommend is having the Guardians go to a park. That way, because right now Etta didn't go to puppy school. She's fearful and anxious of a lot of little things. And that's something we can actually have my Laura come back out to and work with the guardians that they want to on some basically counter conditioning and desensitization. If you make a list of all the sounds that Etta is reactive to, we can come back and show you a technique that actually helps that sound become an indication that something good's going to happen. So instead of freaking out when I hear a ding, the ding means something good, and the dog isn't fearful for that. If the dog is fearful, that's going to affect all their other behaviors, and I think that that's a contributing factor here. So if you get a puppy, make sure you take it to puppy school. A lot of people don't take their puppy to puppy school because they think, my puppy loves everybody. It's these developmental cycles that all puppies go through, and the developmental cycle ends. If you didn't take advantage of it, you got a lot of work that you got to put in. And so if you take them puppy class, it does most of the work for you, and it's a lot of fun, and you don't really have to work at it. So basically, taking a dog out on walks, I'd like the dogs to both go on a walk, at least 1 5-minute walk every single day. We're going to let them sniff as much as possible. It's going to be a little bit harder if there's snow, but from what I have seen on the Farmer's Almanac, there's probably not going to be a lot of snow. It's not going to be a very cold winter. So when we're walking, we're going to let them sniff as much as possible. And if we can go to a park, we're not going to have the skateboards or the cars or the things that get Etta upset because we have this big open field. So what we want to do is just get her used to walking around, and you can have like a retractable leash. I don't really like retractable leashes, but maybe just like an 8 or 10 foot leash. And we're kind of letting her go and sniff wherever she wants. If she's not sniffing, use that cheese, kind of sprinkle little slivers of cheese here and there. And eventually the dogs, and that's probably something to start in your backyard, and then you can do it on walks in your neighborhood. But the idea is in a park, we're walking this big grassy open area where we have plenty of distance, so nothing is near us. I'm going to walk the dog. I would recommend walking the dogs separately. That way they're not feeding off of each other. And the dogs are eventually, there's not a lot of stimulus, so they're enjoying their environment. They're sniffing, which is calming. It builds confidence. It's relaxing, and it drains energy. And the dog is practicing a new behavior. Instead of barking the whole time, I'm sniffing. So you probably have to use a little bit more cheese for Hulk, who does just bark the whole time, but he can't bark and sniff at the same time. And if there's cheese on the ground, he's licking that up. He can't bark for that either. Again, what we want to build is one behavior pattern on top of another, on top of another, on top of another, until eventually the dog forgets that I used to bark at the park. Once we get to the point where the dog's sniffing a lot on the grass, then we can find the little edgeway of the little path that winds around the park, and we start walking our dog in that path. We let him go on the grass on either side of it. So that is a way of helping them get ready to go back to the neighborhood, because at first we practiced just sniffing and we're not reacting. Now we're practicing kind of following a path, and there's some concrete, which is similar to a sidewalk. And then the great thing is you're setting this up because this time of year, there's not going to be as many people in the neighborhood. Try to find a time of the day when there's not going to be a lot of traffic. Probably, mid-morning, from about 10 o'clock until about 11:30, and then maybe from about 1 o'clock to about 3 o'clock. Those are going to be times where you're not going to have as much stuff in the neighborhood. So if you walk and get the dog confident and practice walking around the neighborhood without all that stimulus, they're establishing a behavior pattern of doing that, walking around the neighborhood without barking. And I would try to avoid walking near the neighbor who sent you the anonymous letter, if you know who that neighbor was, for obvious reasons. Now, we also want to teach the dogs some new tricks and commands. The dogs really know no tricks and commands. So I did a little clicker training. I left that clicker for you. Remember, the click is to indicate when the dog does what you want. So if you're teaching a dog to roll over, when roll over is a little bit more complicated. You might actually shape that one. And again, we can send Dominique or Kayla come back to show you how to do a couple tricks. But if you're teaching a dog to sit, as soon as the butt hits the ground, you click, and then you give it the command, or excuse me, give me the reinforcer. We're not going to say anything. We're just going to click for the action. So when you're teaching to lay down, as soon as the dog puts its chest on the ground, you click, then you put that treat in its mouth. Remember, the order is the dog should hear the command word first, then get the action happens, and then they get the reinforcer. Now, when you're using a clicker, we're skipping that first step. We're luring the dog into a sit. When they sit, we click to mark that, saying that's what I wanted. The click is to indicate what I wanted, and then we put them a treat in their mouth after that. Make sure you guys prime the clicker after I leave, about 10 treats. Do it twice today, once or twice tomorrow with each dog separately, and then you won't ever have to do that again. But eventually, you can, if you have one of these things, you can, a little hanging deal, and then you have your clicker here. When you're on a walk, you can ask your dog to stop and sit, and they sit, and you click, and then give them a treat. And that click is a very distinct sound. And now we would prefer to have them sniffing and all that fun stuff, but every once in a while, ask them to come, when they do take their nose up on the ground, they look at you, sit, and they sit, click, and they give them a treat, and let them go back to sniffing. So the more that they reorientate at you, the better. One of the things that I do is when a dog looks at me, I would click and then give them a treat for looking at me and just making myself more present. But again, for these dogs, I want them sniffing as much as we can. So don't worry about the clicking for looks quite yet. That's something we can get back to a little bit later on. But teaching them how to sit, how to come on command, like in the exercises we showed you, how to lay down, how do you go to the dog bed. Name all of the individual toys. So we got a little turquoise dragon here. So we name this, count, turquoise or whatever it is. So every time she brings it over to you, say turquoise, and then she gives it to you. And after a while, you can say turquoise, and she goes and gets this treat or this toy. Now remember, when she brings it over to you, she's got it in her mouth. Don't try to pull it away from her. You can play tug, and that's a good thing to do. I would get a couple rope tugs, and that's a nice way to burn energy as well. But if she brings it over to you, hold a treat up. When she drops it, say drop, and then she drops it, and you put it in her mouth. So you're kind of anticipating, pull that treat out, she's going to drop it pretty quickly. So you say drop, try to time it right before she does, and she drops it, then you put it in her mouth. Don't pick the object up. After a while, she'll get more and more inclined to come over, and she'll just drop it in front of you, and then you pick it up and throw it. And eventually, once she does start dropping it like that, you tell her to sit. And when she sits, I pick it up and throw it. So we're adding more conditions to that. I'd also like you to find some, go to Amazon or Chewy, look for some treat dispensing toys. Specifically, I'd like you to get an Omega Paw treat ball. I'd like you to get about 4 more lick mats, and so you can have those loaded up with peanut butter. It's kind of a pain when you have to go in the kitchen and put it down. So if you have them in the fridge, put wax paper between them so they don't stick. And then basically, you just, when you have guests come over, if the dog is barking the whole time when guests come over, that's what they're practicing doing. So the idea is we have the lick mats, we pull them out, we let the dog start licking up, and a couple minutes before the guests arrive. Then the guests come over, the dog might bark a little bit, and we just ignore. Remember, any attention is validating. They get done barking, they go back to the lick mats, and and then they're licking and they're practicing not barking while the guests are here. Make sure the guest leaves before the lick mat's done. So we want the idea of the situation, they bark a little bit and then they leave, or then the guest leaves before they get a chance to actually bark. And after that happens enough, then you can let them get to the point where maybe a minute, a couple seconds after the lick mat. And then a little bit further before the guest leaves. But the idea is we want to prevent the behavior at all by doing some maintenance. Remember, you can get a bully stick and drill a hole through the end of it and get one of those big long ones and get a dumbbell or something like that, put it on the floor. That way Hulk can't swallow the whole thing. He'll just sit there and gnaw on it, which will make him feel good. Now be careful, bully sticks is a higher value item that can cause a fight, so you might actually have to have one for each dog. But I would probably give him the bully stick or give her the bully stick and let him lick on the lick mat. But you can use both lick mats as well. And you can also take a little bit of the crack. We call it crack. This is the stuff I was using. That I broke up. This has the dust at the bottom. This is freeze-dried beef liver. And we call it crack because dogs fiend for it. So it's from Stewart's. Stewart's freeze-dried beef liver is what you order on Amazon. You get it in a tub. And then at the end, there'll be a bunch of dust at the bottom. You can sprinkle that dust on top of the peanut butter, and that makes that even more delicious and more appealing. So look for some other, I want you to get an Omega Paw treat ball or 2. I get the medium one. The large one's pretty expensive, and the medium one's perfect size. Get a couple of snuffle mats. Right now, the Guardians free feed the dogs, which robs them of a lot of motivation. Also, they get boosts of confidence when they earn their food. So if you start feeding them 2 or 3 times a day with a snuffle mat, so you put the food, work it in there, and the dog comes over and eats. And as soon as the dog walks away, pick up the snuffle mat, put it back up. So once you walk away, you can eat as much as you want, but once you walk away, the food disappears. Eventually, you can get them in a rhythm. Older dogs especially, when they know what's coming, they can anticipate, that can lead to some confidence. Confidence will reduce some of the barking. And so now he might come and demand bark at you. Don't do it. If he does that, he's barking for mealtime. Wait for a lull in the barking longer than about 5 seconds, then get up and go feed him. But after a while, the dogs, now they're working for their food. It burns energy on the snuffle mat, and you can wash those in the washing machine. But look for other treat dispensing toys and puzzles and games that you can get for them. The Kongs are great, but there's a whole bunch of other things. Google scent games and look for a couple of variants of that so you can practice hiding treats around the house and the dogs have to hunt and search and find it. So if you build up their confidence by teaching them new tricks, we get them more exercise and mental stimulation. We help them practice a little self-restraint and self-control by incorporating some rules, such as not being allowed near the kitchen when we're preparing food, near the dining room when we're eating. Things along those lines can really help. Once they eventually know how to sit, go to the door and tell them to sit. When they sit, then open the door as soon as they sit. So now you're saying, if you want to go outside, you have to do something for me first. That's that pre-mac I talked to you about. You don't have to worry about that a lot. That's something we can work up to a little bit later on. Let me see, what else? Whenever feeding them, it'd be helpful if you can eat something first. Eat just about 5 bites of a chip or cracker is all it takes. It doesn't have to be a real meal. Yes, Hulkster. Yes. What a happy. I would say happy dog, but his barking is to get people to leave. Etta's barking is to get some attention. So I remember good attention, bad attention, the same thing. So I tell them to be quiet. That's just as validating as anything else. So because you have all the great windows and sight lines in your house, it's easy for them to see out. And I know that they don't bark a lot inside, but that may change at some time. So basically just covering the bottom pane of windows through your dining room and here in your kitchen. So when they go there, they can't see outside. Let me see, what else? Anything else you want me to cover?
That's it.
Oh, passive training. Passive training is rewarding the dog when it does the action on its own. So if I'm sitting here watching TV and Etta comes to me, and I know she's coming straight up to me. I'm not calling her. I don't influence her by having a treat, but I know she's coming to me anyways. When she's about a foot away or a couple feet away, at first I would say when she's a foot away, I would say come and then pet her. Remember to pet under the chin or on the shoulders. Kind of this oval area here for dogs is a great place to pet them. You want to avoid reaching over the head and petting a dog on top of that, especially for fearful dogs, because the down nose orientation is insecure. So I want you to be cognizant and pet them when they come to you on their own, when they sit near you on their own, when they lay down there on their own. The idea is if you know she's about to lay down, you say crash is the word that I like to use. And so you know she's coming over and she's kind of doing that circle before she lays down. Right before she does, say crash, and then she lays down, and then you pet her or give her a treat. It's important she pets or gets a treat after that to sync it. So the word, then a word comes first, and because you anticipate the action or can predict the action, and then the reinforcer in terms of a treat or affection comes later. For the dog, now I'm looking at, you guys have a lot of great dog beds. I would get like a sheet that you could put in underneath it, and so you put a kind of a cover across the dog beds, because all the dog beds, it's going to be easy, like I showed in the video above, for the treats to fall in the wrong spot. So if you kind of put those underneath and wrap it a couple times, that way when the treat is on top of it, it's a light cream, white, or light gray, the dog's going to see those treats right away. Now the treats that I was using, I don't have them here, they're on the counter, are the Tricky Trainer chicken liver treats. Make sure you zip the bag closed and burp all the air out of them. They work really well because of the smell. Remember, smell is most important, temperature is number 2, taste is a distant third. Now for to get them to come outside, you're gonna get that warm chicken. So, but let me finish the passive training. I say what we were doing is celebrating the things the dog does that we like. So that's the watchword I use. So basically, you can hear that Hulk's right here. So let's say Hulk is walking towards me and I'm not paying attention. One of my partners can say, celebrate. And that means I look at the dog and I just start petting him as soon as I possibly can. I don't want to startle the dog, but you want to try to pet him right within 2 seconds maximum of them doing the action. So now Hulk's like, every time I come to the human, I get a treat or attention. Every time I sit, I get a treat or attention. Every time I lay down, I get a treat or attention. I go to the dog bed, I get a treat or attention. And we're saying the word right before they do that. And eventually we can say Jamaica, and the dog goes to the dog bed that is associated with the word of Jamaica. But avoid saying Jamaica, 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 because the dog's like, oh, so Jamaica means stand over here and look at you inquisitively. So we repeat the command word, we'll teach a dog to ignore it. So don't say the word until you know the dog is gonna do the action and you can predict when they're gonna do it. Come. He just came over to me, I reached under, I petted him, and I said come when he was 1 step away, and I started petting him. Eventually, when he was 2 steps away, I'd say come. Then I would say when he's at 3 steps away, as long as I can predict that he's coming to. And the exercise that I showed you guys in with the recall, do that with each dog. Give one of the dogs a lick mat, and then the other dogs, and at first start about 7 feet apart, then go to about 10 feet apart, then one person is next room, but just maybe at the dining room table. And then eventually the dogs have to go up and down to find you. And that's another command that we can teach them. I'd like them to know at least 10 commands within the next about 2 months. And that gives you a lot of different ways to redirect their attention and also builds their self-esteem and confidence, which will help with their barking. And for the dog beds, I'm trying to think. I guess that's about it. Anything else I want to go over?
I don't think so.
All right. I would use a different name for each dog bed, and the dog beds that I would recommend you get are the kennel bed liners on Amazon. So it's exactly they're rectangular shape, and they have kind of a piping or a roll around the outside, and then that way they kind of catch the treats as you throw them on there. All right, well, this is Hulk that I'm petting right here that you can't see, but you can hear. And over there is Etta, and I'm David, and this is the dog's roadmap to success. Remember, everything you do trains your dog, only sometimes you mean it.